Hello, I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of Council. This meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting and in the gallery may be captured as part of this recording. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting and pay our respects to elders past and present and descendants who may be here this evening. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and abilities and judgment. Apologies and leave of absence. Councillor Jenny O'Connor is an apology. Do we have any declaration of conflict of interest? 4.1, would somebody like to move that we suspend standing orders? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. And I'd like to identify and ask to step forward Iris Manick and Anne Wilson. And I think they may be joined by Councillor Murdoch. You may know that Beechworth was named the Tidy Town of the Year for 2019. These are members of the organising committee, in particular Iris Manick and Anne Wilson, and Barb Murdoch has been a good supporter of them. We'll take a photo and then you might like to say something, Iris? And tell us about all the hard work you've done to achieve this for your community.
No, it's not my hard work. It's the hard work of the community, because the Tidy Towns are projects that the community have done. And this year we entered 20 projects because we couldn't cut over 10 categories. We couldn't not put one in, and the judge nearly died when she got here, and I said, and we raced her around for 2 days, and we got 20 finalists. And we're waiting to hear from KVB whether that's a record. And I've been doing it for 26 years, and I can't remember anyone doing that. Even getting 10 out of 10, you know. So, but we had a very beautiful time at Dimboola. They made us very welcome. Dimboola and I started doing Tidy Towns around the same time. Took us 17 years to get a state award, and I think they said 15, didn't they? Yeah, Dimboola 15. So we've been lucky. This is our 4th in 10 years, and that's a pretty good. And we also have the record of having 2 Dame Phyllis Frost Award winners, of course, which is another record.
And it's been 12 years straight we've been finalists.
Yep. So it's a pretty good record, and it just shows you what our community is doing and what our community out there are like. And I wish to goodness that everyone will tell everyone. It's not about sweeping streets and keeping them clean or picking up papers or planting plants. There is, Catherine will attest to it, there is 10 very distinct categories, from young leaders to cultural and heritage, community action, clean waters, clean beaches and waterways. I can't remember all of them, but it's far from what the people perceive to do it is. So, but that's all I need to say, and I just say thank you and great Beechworth, you've made us all proud, and that's our community. Okay.
Congratulations. We'll put those in pride of place. Councillor Murdoch.
Because we're going to get a stand made, hopefully, to put it on.
Thanks, Iris.
I'll just tell everyone the big one, we've got to hand back when we host 2020 state finals
Thanks, Iris. We're now into open forum, which we've got to... Oh, yes. Would somebody like to move that we resume standing orders? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Is anybody against? Carried. Item 5, open forum. We've got written questions from 3 people. First up, Harvey Anderson.
My question relates to the article in today's Water Mail. You've probably all seen it. It's called Stop Work Fuss About a Tree, and it's about the attempted felling of a brittle gum. And Mr Mayor, I'm pleased to note from your comments in the paper that you acknowledge the importance of brittle gums to Indigo. Thank you. The owner of Mayday Hill started work to fell the tree on Sunday afternoon after lunch. The question is, who stopped that work? Was it on safety grounds? When was the Heritage Victoria notified of that work? When did Council learn of the plans for the felling that afternoon? I ask those questions because it's very unclear from the article itself. The second question is about the length of time it took between the advice from John Hawker and Jenny Penner, who walked around with George in 2017, and they were told that they needed to do something about 3 trees, and now 2 of them have been attempted, one's down. So what plans has the owner submitted in respect to complying with that request from Heritage Victoria? The third question relates to the allegation in here, or supposition, that you, CEO, told Heritage Victoria in advance of the work that was going on, and it was almost the impression that it was a good thing that George was trying to really help clean up the place. So I'd just like to ask, what's the council position on this?
The Director of Planning and Corporate Services.
Thank you for your question and the opportunity to clarify the course of events. So no, Council didn't know before Sunday that this was going to occur. So it was a surprise to Council when it was discovered, and I believe we saw it when we came back to work on Monday that there was some work going on. No permit, no understanding before that. So Council contacted Heritage Victoria, being responsible for a lot of the permits on this site. Council contacted Heritage Victoria just to understand if they had issued a permit or permitted the work, and they weren't aware of it either. So as you have pointed out, Heritage Victoria issued a stop work on that. Now, to your point about the reasoning behind that, I'm not sure, but without a permit, Heritage Victoria would usually issue a stop work to understand what's going on. So the main reason was that it was not permitted, so they said hold off until we get some more information. So that was the way the events occurred. As to your questions about the plans for the site, there has been at least one study that we know of, and possibly others that have been done for the owner or by the owner. At this stage, there's no current applications into Council or Heritage Victoria that we know of to do other works on trees at this site.
Thank you. I just note that there is another tree that I understand the owners were told was a risk back in 2017, and it still remains a risk as far as I know. So it would be nice to think that the owners up here were really very conscious of safety and were really trying to make the place safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Harvey. Ed Tyree.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, councillors. My question relates to the Stanley Township. At the August monthly meeting, the Mayor responded to a question regarding an update on progress of the Stanley Township issue, that he and the CEO would be meeting with state government planning officials in the coming weeks, and the matter would be placed on the agenda of that meeting. The meeting was reported to have taken place in Council's weekly update during September. Can the Mayor advise the outcome of the meeting and any progress that's taken place, getting us closer to a positive resolution of this long-standing matter, please?
Very pleased to. The CEO and I met with the Victoria Planning Authority in Wodonga to try and break this impasse. They gave us some advice and arranged a further meeting with themselves and with DWELP, which we went to. You'd be aware that the CFA had not given approval of the current zone area of the amendment. Since then, the CFA have suggested a smaller town zone area. We believe they may reconsider that. Council needs to do a bushfire risk assessment of the smaller zone area. There is nothing set in concrete. We're trying to move this forward, and we have some confidence that we will, whether it's to go back to the original zone or to see whether the community would be acceptable to the smaller zone area. There'd be repercussions with that, I would imagine.
Will you consult the community on this issue?
Would have to, yes, guaranteed.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. It was a bit of a surprise for me, I'm not sure about the CEO, that they had done a smaller area and submitted that to the Minister. Be very certain the file is still on the Minister's desk. It has not been moved.
And Mayor, when you say a smaller area, is that smaller than the area that was proposed in the planning?
Yes.
I mean, how much smaller can you get in the centre of the town?
Well, yes. It certainly wasn't half, but...
Maybe around the pub, we could have a township.
Yeah, so the community would be consulted, but we hope to get the main area back. But we've certainly got to do that risk assessment and have talks with the CFA. But we were very well received, and I felt quite good about it, and the CEO did as well.
Well, at least that's progress. Mayor, thanks for your efforts, and to the CEO too, and we look forward to hearing from you.
I'm like you, Ed, I'm very confident.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just curious, how many blocks would be impacted on that smaller area? Like, how large would it be?
I'd say it would be roughly about 2/3. Yeah. On the documents we saw, you couldn't count the blocks. Yeah. It was part of a much bigger area. So we'll just wait and see. Jeff Palmer? Is that it, Councillor Goldsworthy? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. Good evening. My first two questions relate, Mr Mayor, to the community forums. There was a time a couple of years ago when the present notes of the proceedings of community forums were recorded in the form of minutes, and that practice seems to have long ceased. In 2018, I think proceedings were reported and including on the website in a tabular format, a topic, a comment and response. This year we've been able to further reduce it to topic. No comments, no record of response, no action statements. Frankly, I find it almost contemptuous, and it demonstrates, I think, little regard for the matters raised by the ratepayers or indeed for the ratepayers themselves. I hope that council might review that practice. But that's not all the changes. At about the same time, we ceased that's not all. We changed the format of the meetings, and we did away with the single forum and introduced the sort of divide and rule principle where participants were split up onto several tables. So now I have two questions, Mayor. Why was the matter of the format of community forum meetings, which was raised at the meeting in Beechworth and presented by Councillor Goldsworthy in summary at the conclusion of the table discussions, not included as a discussed topic in the notes of that meeting? And why was the result of the vote, taken by a show of hands, on attendees' satisfaction with the meeting arrangements also not reported or recorded in the notes?
CEO.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, technical glitch there. Thanks for the questions, Jeff, through you, Mr Mayor. The first one, what does happen with the community forum is we do take notes, and at the end of the meeting, staff do summarise the themes and summarise the issues that emerged from that and place those on the website the next day. Now, there are occasions when there's duplications or very similar comments, so we do theme them up and get a summary of the items. It is fair to say, after your letter, we went back to look at the notes from that day, and it's fair to say, yes, you did raise it up at the table, and no, that didn't go onto the website that night, the following couple of days, in regards specifically to the format of the community forums. So that's an oversight on our part, on the staff's part. So we will address that tomorrow. We'll go back into the website and make sure that your comment about the format is included in the summary of what was discussed at that meeting. In regards to show of hands, there wasn't necessarily a vote on the night. I believe a councillor out of interest just did a straw poll in the meeting. There was certainly not a vote or count taken or anything like that. So I think that was took that for what it was at the time. It's a straw poll. In regards to the format of the meeting in the future, really, we do have a format that we've been using now for some time, which has overall received quite strong support. So in terms of, different people like different styles, certainly some like yourself who do prefer the open forum format. Others are saying they like the table format because they're able to get all the issues out on the table in the short space we have. But certainly at every particular meeting, it's really up to the chair of that meeting. If the format's only suggested, and if the chair of that particular meeting chose to run it differently, they could. And the chair is usually the mayor of the day is usually the chair of most of the meetings, or his representative on the day. If someone chose to run that meeting slightly differently, they could. That's the discretion of the chair of a particular meeting. But certainly before we embark on next year's round of forums, we will come back and have a review of how it's gone in the last 12 months and whether we think any changes need to be made. So we'll certainly look at the feedback we've received, to look at how we feel they've travelled and whether there's improvement opportunities for them. And so these types of things will be discussed over the next couple of months before we come back out in February or March, whenever they resume again next year.
Mr Mayor, I just would have thought that it is a community forum, and I thought it would have been good to touch base with the community as to how they wanted it run. And that was the purpose of my suggestion that we seek at the next meetings a question to be asked and the results recorded as to how attendees felt. Enough of that matter. My third question relates to the Barmouth Park Committee of Management. This is the second or third attempt by Council, I think, in about as many years to determine the structure of the management for the Barmouth Park facility that actually works. It's important that after so many attempts, I think, that we now try and get it right. And item 11.5 on the agenda tonight and the associated documents seeks to both explain and detail what a future arrangement might look like and how it might operate. The 36 pages, I think, are quite remarkable, if only to demonstrate just how complex we can make it. I've not had yet time to consider all of the matters and possible implications of what is proposed. However, at just a quick first glance, I notice not only conflicted, contradictory and misleading statements on a variety of issues, but also the proposed continuation of previous arrangements that have not only not worked, but been dysfunctional and the cause of conflict within the committee. Hardly a solid foundation for a new committee. I will likely make a submission on that, on what is proposed, but before doing so, I would like to be assured that my efforts are not in vain and that Council is genuinely interested to get it right. and will listen to comments, setting aside any prejudices or preconceived ideas. Hopefully they might even engage in debate where matters are unclear or contentious. So my question, Mayor, is, having invited feedback from the public on its proposed governance model for the management of Barmutha Park, will Council consider applying Section 223 of the Local Government Act to the community consultation process, thus providing a person making a submission the opportunity to request they appear in person before Council and be heard in support of that submission?
Just before I hand over to the CEO, it's a bit difficult because Council hasn't made a resolution in regard to that item. It's on the agenda.
I'm sorry?
It's on the agenda, that item, but Council hasn't made a decision whether to adopt it or to vote for it or to turn it into a motion.
Well,
so I'm just saying it's a bit difficult for the CEO, but if you just want to ask him about the 223 process, I'm sure he'd be happy to address that. Is that what you're asking?
The question is typed out and is fairly clear, Mr Mayor.
Yeah.
Sorry?
We don't know whether that will be passed or not?
No, we don't.
No.
I'm asking that councillors consider it and pass it as part of the motion.
Do you wish to address that?
Or even as an administrative matter, if it can be best handled that way, so that submitters, and not just myself, are interested in speaking to the councillors. That's all. That's the objective.
Yeah.
How it's done, I don't mind.
So thanks, Jeff, for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor. There were certain comments in there about councillors in terms of taking all submissions seriously, and if I can boldly speak on their behalf, they do take every submission seriously. In this particular process, there was a long consultation process in interviewing lots of stakeholders, and as you're aware, Jeff, in particular yourself, we had a special one just for yourself so that you can make a submission before it was before you went on holidays this year, sorry. As you're aware, Section 223 process, Local Government Act, does have very prescriptive requirements, and it's something that does get used for things like budgets and council plans and sale of land and things like that. It can be a process that is quite lengthy and time-consuming, and so, for example, it requires a special meeting of council to hear submissions. It's not something that we use a lot because of that, but I think the consultation processes we have in place are fairly strong, and I think you will have noticed, in particular the last 12 months, more and more of our items are going out for public exhibition than they ever have in the past. So what we need to do, I think, is to have as much consultation and enough opportunity for feedback as possible. You will see in 11.5, the officer's recommendation on this one is, having gone out to the community, got feedback, come back with a preferred model, that the model does go out again one more time for exhibition and give everyone a further opportunity to make a submission. And I would propose that that's sufficient in this case to make sure all the views are heard about this specific issue, and that every opportunity then is provided to provide all that feedback to councillors. You'll have every opportunity to make a full submission and raising all the issues you want to, and council have every opportunity to hear that. Having said that, that's my view, and my recommendation in the papers are according with that, but certainly any councillor tonight is free to take that on board if they so choose, and as the Mayor has indicated, it's before council tonight, so we can't presuppose what will happen when that comes up.
Thank you.
Item number 6, condolences. Item number 7, the recommendation is that Council confirm the minutes of the ordinary Council meeting held on the 24th of September 2019 as published on the Council's website, and 2, confirm the minutes of the confidential session held on the 24th of September 2019 as distributed separately. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Price. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item number 8 talks about question taken on notice. A question was on notice was taken from Jonathan Riley. It's been answered by the Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton, and is in the agenda. Item 9, do we have any deputations and or petitions? Item 10.1, the recommendation is the Council accepts the Quarter 1 2019-2020 Finance and Performance Report, including progress reports on financial performance, capital works, annual Council action plan. 2, adopts the Quarter 1 budget variation as detailed in this report and attachment, including the following adjustments: 10,803 of additional operating income, 460,968 of additional operating expense, 486,534 of additional capital income, and 3,89,991 of additional capital works expenditure. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Trenery. Councillor Goldsworthy.
There's actually a fair bit attached to this. There's 5 separate documents. And so before I actually speak to the motion, I'd like to ask a question of the staff, if I may. That's in relation to the Ned Kelly Alive project that's on the Capital Works Register. What's the current situation with that project, please?
Thank you, Councillor. So we previously were working with Tourism Victoria and the state government to seek a funding pool. That pool hasn't eventuated. We now have a new funding round being announced by the government in relation to regional infrastructure. So we're meeting with them tomorrow, in fact, to discuss the opportunities under that new program. And there are also some new funds becoming available through a grant stream under program called the Regional Digitisation Program. So we're exploring those opportunities to be able to receive external funding to match the Council's commitment to that project.
Thank you. I have another question on page 4 in relation to the Epic mountain bike track design and construction. In the explanation, it just talks about an external project manager has been engaged to deliver this project. Initial meetings with Develop Parks Victoria and others identified several challenges that may delay the project commencement. Just wondering if we could get an update on that and what are the issues?
Thanks, Councillor. Look, we've only really just made a start. The funding kicked in, so our project was to commence in September. So during that time, we've appointed a project manager to work with us. So it is really early days. The meetings we've had with DELP and Parks Vic are very much around land tenure. There's some real differences with this trail, the sort of territory it runs through compared to something like the rail trail. So the Beechworth Historic Park, I think, is reserved under the National Parks Act. So there's complications in there just around how we would transfer the management rights to council, for example. So there's those sorts of issues that we just need to, I suppose, resolve the alignment and then all the, the associated land tenure and moving into, the planning approvals, native edge impacts. So, similar to the other major projects.
Thank you. Just one last question, if I may. On the council action plan, which also forms part of the financials, it just talks about investigating options and priorities for the appropriate placemaking in towns, and the action is around the Rutherglen placemaking project. I'm just wondering when that's likely to go ahead.
Thanks, Councillor. So the Rutherglen placemaking is scheduled to commence in the new financial year, so the 2021 year. We'll be looking at the project brief prior to that, so in the back half of this year, so that we can make a start early in the new financial year.
Thanks. I'd just like to talk to the performance now, so the motion. My comments effectively taken straight off the report, and it's $180,000 favourable variance year to date, where we have a reported position overall net surplus of a bit over $12 million. There's a lot of explanations within this item, and it's a fair read, but I'd like to say that we're tracking well and that we should support this motion.
Councillor Trenery.
I too have a question in regards to the motion itself. You'll see there, just getting up top, there's some figures that we're adding in to this current budget, and I'd just like to know what effect that'll have on the bottom line, if any.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. So the bottom line across the 2 years isn't impacted. The majority of these changes are moving from 1 year to the next year. The only exception to that would be where there's been some additional income, say a grant that wasn't known about at the time the budget was adopted, and that would be additional income into council. But yeah, across those 2 years, the net effect is zero.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy, to sum up. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.2, the recommendation is that Council endorses the attached draft Local Law 3 meeting procedures and common seal for the purpose of community consultation in accordance with Section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989. 2, requests community feedback on the proposed changes made to the draft local law, and B, suggestions for the open forum section of the Ordinary Council meeting. 3, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to give public notice of the preparation of the draft Local Law 3, including any information required to be made available in accordance with the Local Government Act 1989. And 4, schedule any person wishing to be heard in support of their submissions to the proposed Local Law 3 to be heard by Council at a special Council meeting on 17 December at 5 p.m. Would somebody, Councillor Shepherd?
If I could just amend that motion to, instead of having it on the 17th of December at 5 p.m, we have it at Tuesday the 10th at 6 p.m. So the local law really is around our meeting procedures and common seal, and probably
that now becomes the motion. I'll
Yep.
just call for a seconder.
Oh.
Would somebody like to second by Councillor Murdoch?
Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd.
As I was saying, the Local Law 3 is meeting procedures and common seal, and probably the community is going to be most interested in the fact, like tonight, we added in the community and council achievements, which will put that in more regularly into the agenda, so that there's a space kept for that to happen, and that open forum, as we've had this evening, will we maintain it as we have now? At the moment, the officer report has got that another change is a requirement for the questions to be submitted by midday on the day of the council meeting. So there's an opportunity for the community to give us feedback about open forum and what it means to them and how they would like it conducted. We certainly have opinions on how it should go, but it's going to give the community an opportunity to give feedback on they're probably the main areas that the community is going to be more interested in.
Okay, Councillor Murdoch. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price.
Just to say that we certainly welcome your feedback, particularly on the open forum where you do get to participate in the meeting. There are lots of different ways that this happens across the state with different councils, and we're trying to find the way that best suits us here at Indigo, and if you've got any feedback on that for us, we'd certainly like to hear it.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Do you wish to sum up, Councillor Shepherd?
The summing up also includes that there's the options are in the briefing, that the officers have done quite a a good review on what happens throughout the state. So people are able to certainly put in their own opinions on how it should work, but there are options here too. So I ask people to have an input. That'd be great.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.3, the recommendation is the council accepts the attached Assembly of Councillor records. Would somebody like to move that motion? Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Trenery. Councillor Goldsworthy.
I know this is a rarely commented item, but if you do have a look at it, there are 3 meetings for the Indigo Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee. Primarily the focus around those 3 meetings is around a few questions, and what is council's role in an advisory committee? Why do we need an Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee? What will the committee do, and how will the committee function? We were able to tap a number of people on the shoulder and get them to a meeting. We discussed what we're looking for, and given the responses and that sort of thing, it's moving forward, and we're quite excited by what came out of it. So hopefully the future will be a little bit brighter and we'll get more out of an advisory committee. Yeah, but it was well worth doing, and there's a fair bit of work done by the staff and the councillors, and so for that, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Trenery. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Carried. Item 10.4. The recommendation is the council approves application PP 190226, Bilson's Beverages Proprietary Limited, subject to the conditions included in attachment 3, and 2, issues a notice of decision to grant a permit. Somebody, Councillor Price.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that motion and add an amendment as well, which I'll now read. Point 3 amends the following conditions. Prior to the consumption of liquor on site commencing, an amended red line plan must be submitted for approval and endorsement that limits the sale and consumption of liquor to within the walls of the ground floor and basement levels of the historic brewery building. Point 4, change condition XII on page 404 to read, provide for bus parking on site or an approved location outside of residential zoned areas. Point 5, and add to condition 11 landscape and fencing plans to be submitted. The plans must also detail and make provision for 1, an effective visual landscape screen to be planted using advanced plantings along the boundary with 31 Last Street, and 2, the planting of appropriate shade trees using advanced plantings along the northwest edge of the car park, all to the satisfaction of the responsible authority.
Would somebody like to second that motion? Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price.
Councillors have given this decision a lot of careful consideration. Obviously, the original decision came to us in September last year. Since then, there's been another application, and this is an amendment to the application to extend it. We held a focus meeting where, rightly so, residents raised concern with us predominantly around amenity relating to noise, parking, increase in traffic, all of those things that we've carefully considered. And we also conducted a site visit today, not engaging with the business, just with our planning staff to really get a feel for the site. And whilst we appreciate the impact on amenity for the residences nearby, we hope, and with your assistance, that the conditions, the site management plan and the landscape and fencing plans can mean that these two, that the residences and that the business can work together and that it can be a successful operation for both the residences and the business. I think that's the part that's been lacking since the first permit application, is that we need to be constantly checking back in with the residences to say, are the conditions being upheld because they are there to protect your amenity as you highlighted to us. That's it from me, Mr Mayor. I'll move that motion.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd.
I seconded this motion because I was concerned about the previous motion, really. I was not keen to support it. But I could feel that there was a possibility that that was going to go through without the conditions of that concerned me, which were that 31 Last Street is right next door to that business and is exposed and really needs some sort of screening there. And that the car park itself really, I think we're at a stage now that we've called a climate emergency that we can't build car parks anymore without having some sort of shade access. I mean, people, of course, are going to park out under the trees in front of neighbours if there's no shade in the car park. So we wouldn't be encouraging people to be going into the car park. So, and of course, the bus issue, if we drop the 5 p.m, it means that we need to know where those buses are going to be able to park at any time of the day, and that needs some sort of process around it. The thing about the soundproofing concerned me, and the amenity about how do people cope with amped music, and I was assured that if people complain because there are sound issues, that we, as a responsible authority, have to react to those issues, and then we will have to amend the conditions, or not amend it, but make allowances. So we would have to enforce some sort of soundproofing, look at the windows, all that. So the thing is, it's really up to the community that live around that, and I understand their residents and their amenity is under threat. It's for them to complain to council, not to, that they're the people that you need to speak to. So hopefully this is a compromise.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Trenery.
I'd just like to congratulate the business for going through this process. It's very important that it gets up and going. It's very important that the community's looked after at the same time. These old buildings don't get looked after unless there's a productive use in them. So to have an old building like that and have a productive use that actually works means the heritage is looked after as well. But I hope it all works out, and I wish the business best of luck.
Would anybody else like? Councillor Goldsworthy.
It was very difficult listening to the discussion last week at the focus group meeting. You walk away wondering what the priorities are. Is it about the development, or is it about looking after the local residents and the amenity of the area? I think that the conditions for this do add some weight to looking after the amenity of the area. I believe that if the applicant doesn't abide by these conditions, then he will have some difficulty with council and other law enforcement agencies. So I only hope what was stated at the last application, that you do work with your neighbours, and if you do, I think you'll have a successful business, and hopefully it'll be in harmony with your neighbours. So best of luck to everybody.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? No. Just 1 second, I just want to ask the CEO. I'd just like to make a comment before it goes to be summed up by the mover. I take into account that Bilson's Brewery was founded in 1865 and has operated since then, so it's 154 years old, 154 years ago. The land is zoned mixed use. This was almost a derelict building, and the investor breathed new life to it, and it's become a bit of a focus point for the Beechworth community. Now, Councillor Price to sum up.
I think, again, just to clarify what's in the added conditions, because as Councillor Shepherd rightly said, we thought that we would add more weight to those conditions to try and further protect amenity. And so it's about the bus parking on site, the landscaping and fencing plans, and the site management plan. And I think for residents and the business, it's really important to engage with those plans and engage with us as the responsible authority to be sure exactly what that means and what your role is in ensuring that those conditions are met. To the Mayor's point about the business, I think that as a council collectively we can agree that we support the business being a success, but that's something that we've had to probably take a step back from in considering this application, because as it was quite rightly pointed out by one of the objectors, it's not their role to consider the sustainability of the business in terms of a permit like this. So as I say, we heard your concern about amenity, and we really hope that these conditions further strengthen that and go some way to protecting your amenity, and we hope that you continue to engage with us about these conditions and how they're working.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.5, the recommendation is that Council refuses application PP 180031 for business identification signage at the Star Hotel 105 to 109 Main Street, Rutherglen, on the following grounds. 1, the signage is inappropriate in its current form for the historic commercial precinct of Rutherglen, and the applicant has failed to provide adequate justification for the proposed signage. Would somebody like, Councillor Goldsworthy?
I'd like to move that this item be adjourned off for 1 month to the next meeting of council.
Would somebody like to second by Councillor Trenery? Councillor Goldsworthy?
From what I understand, the applicant in this matter has made late contact with council, offering to make some amends to the signage. I'd like to give the council staff even further time to negotiate with the applicant in this matter, but I believe it should only be adjourned off for 1 month, because make no bones that if there isn't a satisfactory outcome, and that's to council's satisfaction, then I'm fully in support of taking action against the applicant.
Councillor Trenery?
I just hope both parties work together to resolve it.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Murdoch?
I do agree that I don't like the sign. I think it's not in keeping with the heritage of the town. But as Councillor Goldsworthy said, I think we'll give them should give them a chance to see if they can rectify it first.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.6, the recommendation is the Council notes the Q Springs Water Extraction Facility Monitoring Report content. Somebody like to move that? Moved by Councillor Murdoch, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Murdoch?
No, this is a continuous one, and we do this every month just to keep the monitoring going. And so far, everything has been fine.
Councillor Price? Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.1, the recommendation is the Council adopts the Play Parks Review and Strategy 2019-2029. Councillor Price?
Mr Mayor, can I move that this item be deferred off the agenda until further consultation has been done?
Would somebody like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price?
We've received a submission late yesterday, I think it was, that identified a significant area that had not been consulted with, and we absolutely want to make sure that that occurs before we adopt this strategy.
Councillor Shepherd? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.2, the recommendation is the Council adopts the Early Years Strategy 2019-2024. Councillor Price.
Mr Mayor, if I can change this one to a deferral as well, given that both of these strategies followed the same consultation, I think that we should allow it the same passage to be consulted with this same area that contacted us.
Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Do you wish to continue or...?
Just what I said to the previous strategy.
Councillor Shepherd, do you wish to say anything? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.3, the recommendation is the Council endorses the draft special terms of reference for the new Indigo Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee. That Council endorses public exhibition of the draft special terms of reference for 30 days. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Shepherd.
This committee really has been abeyance for quite a while. We had the two committees, the Burke Museum and Historic Precinct Advisory Committee and the Heritage Advisory Committee, and they have both now been really combined as seen as having the same sort of the same interests, really. They operated separately, were reviewed individually, but were summarised in combination because they both advise Council on matters of built, cultural and natural heritage, as well as future actions or plans that relate to the rich history. So there are a lot of passionate people around heritage in our Shire, and they will be working with the manager of the Burke Museum is going to be the staff member on this committee, and we are inviting people of skill and interest to apply, but of course, firstly, to give feedback on these draft report to see if they want to change something. I know there'll be people who'll have things that want to say. So 30 days, you please, all those people out there who are on the Burke Museum and the Heritage Committee, to if they could give us feedback on what they think about this combined committee.
Councillor Murdoch.
Yeah, I just reiterate what Councillor Shepherd said, is we do need people to come and to put input into this so that we can come out with a really good result. I've been around for quite a long time and been on both of those committees at some stage, and I would like to see it really got done properly this time, really, so that everybody is enthusiastic and they are really both come from the same heritage area, so I think that if we work on this, we'll get a really good result.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price.
Just to say that this has come about as a result of the committee review and also the rescoping of the position at the Burke to make it more of a cultural heritage focus. So I think it's really timely, and our staff have worked together to really work out what the most appropriate terms of reference would be, but the missing link for that is the community, and that's why we turn it over to you to have your say on if we've missed anything and how best this committee can function going forward.
Councillor Goldsworthy.
We identify as a heritage shire. Significant towns possess a huge amount of 19th century heritage, both at our athenaeums, our museums and our landscape. It's critically important that we get the right advice on this. We are looking for skilled people in this area. This is a consultation in relation to the terms of reference. If we get that right and we get the right people on there, hopefully we can do the best with our heritage.
So, Councillor Trenry, there's only you and I left. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
I think most things have been said. I mean, the most important thing is, as the CEO said earlier, is the submissions that come in. We do treat them very seriously. We do really look forward to them. So please, if you would like to have a say in it, it is taken seriously when you put it in.
Just before I ask you to sum up, I'd just like to say and reiterate what's been said tonight about the importance of our history, our heritage and our culture. And I think that's what makes this Shire such a great tourist attraction. And tourism is certainly alive and well in the Shire. Councillor Shepherd.
It was remiss of me to not thank those two previous committees and all the work that they had done up to now. So it's not as if we're starting on a blank page. We've got a lot of work behind us. So we'll be building on that rather than starting again.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.4, the recommendation is the Council notes and receives the draft Rutherglen Destination Management Report and 2, places the report on public exhibition for 30 days. Councillor Trenery.
I'd just like to adjust the recommendation if I can. Leave number 1 as is, and number 2, change it, place the report on public exhibition for 60 days.
Would somebody like to second that motion? Seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Trenery.
This is obviously a vital part of Indigo Shire, destination Rutherglen and the Wine Board. I think we can do a better job in respect to tourism out in that area, and if this facilitates that, then that's fantastic. They've done a huge amount of work in that community, saving Indigo Shire a lot of money when it comes to the VIP. So I hope the end result is we still save that money and get a better result in tourism.
Councillor Murdoch.
Yes, I think that Rutherglen is a great place. It's got some wonderful heritage and it has a terrific places for people to come and visit because there's lots of things to do and to see. And if we can get a management going that is really working well, I think that it's really worth our effort to put in as much as we can to help them along.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Just before you sum up, I'd just like to say that to the businesses of Rutherglen and in particular the members of the board of Destination Rutherglen, that this is only a draft which is going out for public exhibition. Councillor Trenery.
Just basically go over what we've said in the past, but it'd be very important that the businesses and the community in general get behind this and really put in submissions, have a good think about it. I've already had 3 or 4 phone calls from businesses in that area, so hopefully that'll convert into some really good information.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.5. The recommendation is the Council endorses a revived Section 86 Committee of Management for Barmutha Park with the following alterations. Membership of the committee to comprise 1 representative from each user group, general or executive member. 2 community representative positions to be appointed via a board skills-based selection process. The chairperson role to be rotated among committee members annually. Notes that councillors and council officers will not be appointed to the Committee of Management, but a council officer will support the committee for up to 6 months following these revisions. Notes the intention to outsource the management of Barmutha Park Function Centre to an external provider. That council allocates $2,500 to be matched by $2,500 allocation by the Committee of Management to support the development of a strategic and master plan for the Barmutha Park precinct. Places the revised governance model on public display for 30 days and considers any feedback at the December 2019 council meeting. Would somebody like to move that? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Price. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Sporting clubs are often the lifeblood of a local community. It's where people meet and greet and relax. So we've got the football, netball club, the cricket club, the golf club, the hockey club, potentially the chain gang for mountain biking. There was the Lions Club and one other. Sorry? The tennis club, yes, that's right. So it is significant. We want this to work. It's a facility that's probably the envy of many communities, and we just need it to work. And so if we can get the right volunteers to commit the time, we'll commit some resources to it as well, and hopefully it'll all work.
Councillor Price?
I'm not sure what take this is with this committee, as referred to in open forum, but I think that Councillor Goldsworthy's right. We just have to continue to persist with this committee and these user groups. Obviously, we want to find the governance model that best suits them, and that's why we went through that process, and we've arrived back where we started. But we have to have faith in the representatives from the user groups that will be on this committee, that they have goodwill to take it forward, and that we can set it on the right path from here. This complex is the envy of the Shire, and we really hope that this can be a really high functioning committee, as are lots of our other committees of management across the Shire, and so we'll see how this goes.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy? No. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.1, the recommendation is the Council adopts the influenza pandemic plan. Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Goldsworthy.
This has gone through the MEMC. It's a rewrite of a previous plan. The main point being, don't get the flu.
Councillor Murdoch. I'm not sure whether he's looking at you then, but...
Well, hopefully nobody gets the flu. That would be lovely and we wouldn't have to worry about it. But I think that it's incumbent upon us as a council to ensure that if we do have a time when we do have an emergency situation with or a pandemic influenza, we want to make sure that we are here to be able to ensure that everything is in place to ensure that we can look after our people, but we do hope that it doesn't happen.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.2, the recommendation is the Council adopts the amended heatwave plan 2019. Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Another plan to come out of the MEMC. Obviously, this is something that is more likely to happen than not, and we need to be prepared for it. So we've declared a climate emergency. We know that we're going to have a long, hot summer. All the reports are looking that way. So when it happens, we need to be prepared.
Councillor Price.
Yeah, just to say that it's important that we put plans like this in place so that as these events become more of a regular occurrence, we are well placed to sort of go forward with them.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Carried. Item 12.3, the recommendation is that Council endorses a staged approach to delivering the key directions outlined in the Climate Emergency Declaration of July 2019, and that the first stage of the action plan list is developed as outlined in this report, and the Council allocates $12,000 to provide resources to undertake this work. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy.
It'd be poor form of me not to support this. But we've declared a climate emergency. We need to plan for what that will look like and how it'll impact on council. I appreciate that the CEO is asking for funds in order to resource the work that needs to be undertaken. And for that, I'm willing to support the $12,000 request, given that it can't be done internally at this stage.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd.
So we had the motion. Now this is the action, really. We can't have an empty motion from the climate emergency. We need to move forward now and decide what that means to us as a council. And this is the process that we will endeavour to implement to see what the plan is.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price?
Yeah, I think that some criticism that I've heard is that in adopting a climate change emergency that it can be hollow or it can be tokenistic, and this is us following up by saying not the case here. We're going to form a strong action plan, and we're not going to do it on our own. We're going to provide resources, and we're also going to work with the community, work with the adaptation action plan that we had developed in 2016, work with the Environment Advisory Committee and place it on exhibition, and also be really targeted with our consultation. So I look forward to it.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion?
I have a question for the mover.
Councillor Trenery?
As this is a staged part of it, how much do you think the total cost is going to be?
That's right, Councillor Goldsworthy.
I do believe there's an approximate cost to explore and develop the business case at approximately $35,000. At this stage, we're looking for $12,000.
Do you know if there's going to be any ongoing costs thereafter?
We'll take that on advice from the CEO.
Do you wish to answer that, CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you. Our understanding of this is that the stage one will look at a possible action plan, and in consultation with the Environment Committee, come back then with a more detailed action plan there forward, and then it'll be up to council before any second stage to take on board what might come out of the first stage of it. So there's no notion at the moment of what that might look like or what resources might be required of it. Really, this is the first stage to come back with a list of ideas and plans, and then council can decide what to do from there. So I've got no idea or no commitment as to what stage two might look like, or what the action plans might look like, or the ongoing costs associated with that.
Do we have a line budget saying how much we're actually going to spend on this, or is this coming out of other resources?
At this stage, there's no line budget allocated in this year's budget for it. However, you will recall this year's budget has a surplus of some $250,000. So at this stage, in the absence of any other items being deleted, which we're not proposing that would happen, then this would come out of the surplus, and the surplus would be slightly less by this amount.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
While I appreciate the concern about the cost, you should look at it as an investment in our future. We understand that it will cost a lot more if we don't do something now, and we need to start planning for our future. So for that reason, and we know that our climate's changing, we need to start looking at an action plan that will actually prepare us for the future. So I commend this motion.
Is anybody against the motion? All those in favour of the motion? Against? All those in favour of the motion? Councillor Shepherd, Goldsworthy, Gaffney, Murdoch, Price. Against? Councillor Trenery. Item 12.4, the recommendation is the council awards contract PM 1908001703 to XL Grey Brunei for the construction of Section 2 Yakandanda to Osborne's Flat of the Beechworth Yakandanda Rail Trail for the lump sum value of $651,887,000 excluding GST, and 2, authorises the CEO to sign the contract documents and affix the council's common seal. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Trenery, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Trenery.
I'd just like to congratulate all involved to get it to this point. I remember moving a motion, I think we were in Chiltern, or when we had meetings far and away, it was either Chiltern or Tamgam, somewhere like that, to bring this to the number one priority on the list about 6 years ago, I think it was. And there's been a lot of work done to get to this point, and I just congratulate everyone involved. This will be a great section of it, and it will get highly used.
Councillor Shepherd.
Just that this is the bit that from Yakandanda out to Osmond's Flat, so that's an exciting stage for us down that end of the Shire. And that the panel shortlisted and recommended this group as representing the best value for council. They submitted the lowest tender, have relevant previous experience, and presented a construction program to complete the works within the nominated contract date. So, and is located within the northeast. So let's hope that it's all systems go and we're going to have a successful build.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Trenery.
I'm fine.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.5, the recommendation is the council reallocates $130,000 from the priority building renewal works to the Beechworth Goods Shed refurbishment project. 2, awards contract 1920-045 for the Beechworth Railway Goods Shed refurbishment to Ultra Project Services for the lump sum value of $439,921 excluding GST. Authorises the CEO to sign the contract documents and affix the council's common seal. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Trenery. Councillor Goldsworthy.
It's more expensive than we thought it would be. Yeah, look, we do need to go ahead with this. We want to have a functioning railway goods shed. We did receive a grant in relation to this. We're keen to see it happen. And yeah, there are different levels of, I suppose, functions for this goods shed, and this is one where we can get somebody in there hopefully and we'll create jobs and we'll make some good use of the facility in the future.
Councillor Trenery.
When something increases in price, I'm usually the first one to object, but I think the end result of this is we get a much better product at the end of the day, much more usable product at the end of the day, which is the smart thing to do, and it's a smart spend of that money. So I recommend the motion.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
Look, I appreciate that the council's not made of money. That $130,000 coming from the priority building renewal works will be well spent here, and hopefully we'll get a good product at the end of it.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.1, recommendation is the council receives the attached unconfirmed advisory committee minutes and endorses the officer's comments. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Price.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to highlight the work that our advisory committees do, and if I can just open the Access Committee again that I'm a part of, along with Councillor Trenery, gave some great feedback again, and is proposed to look at their next meeting at the library strategy draft and the pools development plan draft, and provided that feedback at the most recent meeting, so look forward to those minutes in the coming meetings.
Okay, Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Trenery.
I'd just like to add to Councillor Price in regards to the ICAC meeting. One of the successes that were recorded was the accessible car park or the disabled car park in Yakandanda, which was something that committee pushed, worked hard to change to a much more practical, sensible solution. So congratulations to everyone on that committee.
Councillor Price, do you wish to sum up? No. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.2, the recommendation is the Council considers and endorses the Indigo Shire Council Annual Report 2018-2019 as required under Section 134 of the Local Government Act 1989. Somebody like to move that, moved by Councillor Goldsworthy. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy.
It's funny with the amount of documents in this meeting that we haven't actually given this as much gravitas as we should, because this is reporting what we've done for the last year. And, you know, we've done a lot. And when we walk away with an operating surplus of $2.5 million, with $7.1 million in cash, we've invested $6.5 million in capital works. We had a completion rate of 71% for our capital works. It's not bad. And if you go into the figures, you look at Buller Gas made us a profit of $613,000. We spent $782,000 on non-council assets. Our parks and gardens, we spent over $700,000 on. Our planning department, people complain about it, and we spent more than $500,000. That's how much it cost us to run. In the Burke Museum, we spent over $400,000. These are all really important things to do. If you look further, I'm sure there'd be things in there about the libraries would cost about $400,000. Our swimming pools would be similar. So it's something we can be proud of. For all the criticism that we cop, we deliver some fine services to the community. That's through the CEO, through the directors, their managers, and all the staff on the ground. So I say congratulations, thank you, and we should be supportive of this motion.
Councillor Shepherd.
In the report is also our council plan themes and actions that we have achieved. And that council plan is something as councillors, when we started, we worked on, and so do the rest of the staff. So everybody in the council owns this council plan. And some of the achievements, I think it's been big. So that we've updated the Indigo Shire Youth Strategy. The Youth Ambassador Program, I think we should be very proud of. I see that the youth are out and about with our youth officer doing amazing things, and you see them in the social media all the time doing, they've just been to Blackburn Farm doing some leadership work. We've completed the works to upgrade the Rutherglen Main Street and Lake King. We've commenced the rail trail. We've completed the toilet upgrade at the Huon Reserve, which we thought that was never going to happen. What else? We now have a 10-year financial plan, and I think last year's budget was probably one of the most easiest to read and the most informative. So I think that's been a great initiative. We've commenced implementation of the Economic Development Strategy. We've commenced implementation of the Tourism Strategy. So that's just a few of the things. And of course, we've developed the Draft Environment Strategy. We've got the Draft Resource Recovery and Waste Management Strategy, implemented Plastic-Wise Indigo. I mean, it's huge. And this is a great document, and I'm sorry we haven't got more time really to look at it. But I'd like to congratulate the staff on making all of this come to fruition, really. We might have the ideas and with you, but then you're the people that do the work on the ground. So thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price.
Just to highlight the grant funding opportunities that we've been able to provide. So there's two line items, $76,000 in funding for the community event and festival grants, and an introduced $30,000 funding stream as part of Active Indigo, and also the launch of a $20,000 community facility energy grants upgrade grants program. I think that's something that we're getting really good at. We've got really strong processes around our grants, and the community can spend that money much better than we can, and they put forward really strong cases, and so we can always stand behind those applications. So I think that's just another really strong point out of this annual report.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
Just to sum up, thank you.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.3, the recommendation is the council notes the updated advocacy plan. Someone like to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Goldsworthy.
For all that we do, one of the most important things that we can achieve is to advocate on behalf of the community. It is important we get out there, we talk to ministers, to our government representatives, to other agencies. It's a critical job. This advocacy plan sets that direction and what we advocate for. It's on behalf of our community. So it's super important that we get it right.
Councillor Price.
And I know that there's things that aren't within our council plan that are in our advocacy plan, and that's because they require different levels of assistance from different governments, or we have to work with different agencies. And so this is quite an extensive list, and I know that it's used well by council and particularly by the CEO and the mayor.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Goldsworthy said and Councillor Price. I see it as possibly not the most important, but right up there with one of the most important things that local council can do for its communities, and that's to advocate on their behalf, whether it's to federal government or state government or other bodies. Councillor Goldsworthy. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. 13.4 is the instrument of delegation. It's quite a lengthy recommendation.
Mr Mayor, before you go through all that, I'm happy to move a motion if people agree to put it out on exhibition for 30 days, and it might save your very long speech in regards to it. So I'm happy to move a motion that the instrument of delegation goes out for public view for 30 days.
Would somebody like to second that motion? Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Trennery.
I think what it does is reiterate the importance that this council holds in community views and community input into these things. There's an expression, the tail wags the dog, occasionally comes up, and this is in regards to the delegations that staff have and council's rights and powers within that as well. So it's good for everyone to get an understanding of where all that stands and have a look at it and feedback to us.
Councillor Shepherd.
Basically, I think the framework of this is that we've put we've got a subscription to Matic Lawyers Delegation Authorisation Service, and it's an industry-wide service for local government. And we've been able to just automatically put in our framework, and it has filled it in with what the delegations should and could be, especially around planning, where it's all you just have to do what they say. But as you say, there are some areas that perhaps we would like the community to see, would just be transparent about who will be making the decisions and who will be authorising them. And I think it'd be good for the community to have an input.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
If we get any submissions in relation to this, I would just like to remind the submitters that if we remove a delegation, it means it'll come to council for consideration, and that's once a month. So it might be a lengthy meeting if we remove too many.
I think it's very important that the community decide whether they want their elected representatives to make a decision or staff members. In a lot of cases, it would be just a staff member's decision, but there's a lot of others that they might like the councillors to make a decision on their behalf. Councillor Trennery, would you like to sum up? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 15 is the Mayor's Diary for information, or if you've got any questions. Item 17, General Business. Councillor Trennery, Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Goldsworthy, Councillor Price, Councillor Murdoch.
Just a little one. And it's about, we've already had it with the trip to South Australia, or to Nil, and with the oh gosh, I've forgotten already. Pardon? Yeah, the tidy towns things. It's terrible. But we did actually take a young lad with us, and whose name I can't remember now, but he just didn't get it that, you know, this was all about what the community does. And he thought that maybe it was a prize, but when Tidy Towns won, and he saw all the things that had happened and all the things that this community actually does, he was absolutely chaffed. He really got it, and so did we all. It's the one thing we really do know is that all our communities, but as well as Beechworth, do a lot of work, and the work that they put in was honoured over in South Australia, and it wasn't just an indication of Beechworth, it was also an indication of the work that goes on right across the Shire. So it was really great, and to the young fella, he had his own application. It was Cooper, yes. And I thought he was pretty brave getting out there with a whole lot of adults, mainly adults, and putting forward his application. So I think it was terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murdoch. Item 18, the recommendation is that the ordinary meeting of council move into confidential session in accordance with section 89.2H and 89.2D of the Local Government Act 1989. I'd just like to mention that I asked the CEO, and he said it's proper that I can mention what that confidential matter will be, and it's the proposed lease of the former Beechworth Library at 1 Harper Avenue. It's designated confidential as it relates to contractual matters under section 89.2D of the Local Government Act. We'll be coming back after we discuss the confidential issue if you'd like to wait. Would somebody like to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Goldsworthy. Is anybody against? Carried. Thank you for your attendance.
You're right.
We've now moved out of confidential into open council. What was proposed in confidential is 18.1. The motion that was moved by Councillor Goldsworthy and seconded by Councillor Murdoch is the council gives public notice of its intention to accept the proposal from the Indigo Veterinary Service for a lease of 10 years with 2 5-year options at $22,100 per annum, indexed annually. The council, in the event of no objections are received in response to the public notice process, authorises the CEO to execute lease documents and to affix the council's common seal. The council notes that if any objections are received in response to the public notice process, a further report will be presented to council to make a decision on the proposed lease, and that council makes its resolutions in relation to this report public. Would anybody like to make any comments about that recommendation in open council? If not, I'll close the meeting. I now declare the meeting closed and thank you for your attendance.